The English geographer Halford Mackinder is famous for promoting the idea that the Eurasian continental space from Central Europe to the Pacific Ocean was the geopolitical heartland of the globe. Control of the resources of this vast land mass, the world island, would bring with it domination of the outer periphery of the maritime states. Who rules the heartland commands the world island, he wrote in 1919. Who rules the world island commands the world. Mackinder first coined the idea in a 1904 article on the geographical pivot of history to alert the British to the possibility that their global power might be overturned thanks to modern communications, which now made it possible to exploit the vast material resources of the heartland. In 1919, he even suggested that Germany and Japan might be able to dominate Eurasia between them at the expense of Russia and China. Germany, with its feet planted firmly across Central and Eastern Europe, Japan, with the advantage of an oceanic frontage. The idea had little impact in Britain and might have remained in obscurity had it not been for the German geographer Karl Haushofer, who read Mackinder's work and was already writing about the geographical pivot in the immediate years after the Great War. It was Haushofer who popularized the term geopolitics to describe the close relationship between geographical circumstances and national power. One of Haushofer's students at the institute in Munich, where he worked, was the young Rudolf Hess, Hitler's future deputy, and an early member of the National Socialist Party. Hess introduced Hitler to Haushofer, who supplied the future dictator with texts on geopolitical subjects to read during his incarceration in Landsberg prison after Hitler's failed coup in 1923. Although the precise link to Mackinder is hard to trace, it is not unlikely that Haushofer gave him a second-hand account of the geographical pivot. By the time Hitler was dictating Mein Kampf to his fellow prisoner Hess, he had clearly imbibed the idea that German destiny would be found in the heartland. Only an adequate large space on this earth, wrote Hitler, assures a national freedom of existence, and this was space to be found in an imagined East. Haushofer later praised Hitler's geopolitical mastery, which reflected his own idea about what he called space conquering powers, drawn from his travels around the British Empire, whose geopolitical mastery he also admired. Haushofer hoped that Germany would help to construct a Eurasian land power that would exclude and dominate the maritime Anglo Saxons. His early work on Japanese colonization in Korea and Manchuria persuaded him that Japan too might take part in the project as the continent minded partner of a continental politics of the world. In 1913, he published a major study of Japan's world position and geopolitical future as a Greater Japan. Geopolitics became popular in Japan in the 1930s because the science appeared to confirm the wisdom of Japanese territorial expansion as the means to overcome Western hegemony. In a manifesto of Japanese geopolitics written in 1940, the scholar Tsunekichi Komaki made the case for Japanese primacy throughout Eastern Asia. Mackinder's Heartland began as an abstract speculation about the future power structure of the globe, but it ended up as a description of the way German and Japanese imperialists sought the El Dorado of Eurasian domination. The fantasy that the world geopolitical order could be turned on its head by large scale territorial conquest was the most extreme of the expansionist ambitions pursued by Germany and Japan in the 1930s and 1940s. Yet the area they now sought to conquer was a vast geographical extent on top of what had already been acquired, and it had to be captured at the expense of three of the world's most powerful states. The gap between geopolitical imagination and geopolitical reality could only be bridged by a mix of racial arrogance and willful disregard for military and geographical realities. Mackinder had never expected the heartland to be conquered entirely from without. Throughout history, no state external to Eurasia has ever established permanent suzerainty there. Geopolitical fantasy was nevertheless not enough to explain the timing of the decisions for conquest, for in both cases there were compelling short term economic, strategic, and ideological factors at work, which both supported and complemented the wider vision of Eurasian power. In Hitler's case, the decision to strike at the Soviet Union was developed incrementally in response to a range of changing circumstances through which fantastic imperial ambitions could be justified to himself, to his armed forces, and to the wider German public as both necessary and unavoidable. The decision was also Hitler's to make. As in 1939, with preparation for the war against Poland, Hitler did not want to be dissuaded once his mind was made up, although Goering and von Ribbentrop, among his close circle, both sought to persuade him for months that finishing off Britain first made greater strategic sense. It was a decision hedged about with uncertainties. In December 1940, the Army Commander in Chief, Field Marshal Walter von Brauchitsch, asked Hitler's army adjutant whether the dictator was really only bluffing over plans to invade the Soviet Union, and was assured that Hitler was now determined to do so. A month later, OKW staff were still so unsure whether Hitler was firm in his intention that they needed to be reassured again that the decision was now irreversible and should no longer be questioned. Until then, the planned campaign had developed in something of a vacuum. For Hitler, there were mixed motives as he wrestled with the problem of defeating the British Empire, confronting the Jewish Bolshevik menace in the East, and fulfilling his desire to seize real living space for the German people. The proximate cause was the refusal of Churchill's government to make peace. When, at the end of July 1940, Hitler had summoned the heads of the armed forces to a meeting to discuss future strategy, he announced that he wanted to annihilate the Soviet state in one great military blow in the spring of 1941, but the purpose was to remove Britain's last prospect of a European alliance. The anti British motive was repeated as a strategic mantra over the 10 months between August 1940 and June 1941, and appeared again in his rambling address to the nation on the morning of 22 June 1941, announcing the onset of Operation Barbarossa. The hour has come in which it is necessary to engage against the conspiracy of Jewish Anglo Saxon warmongers with the equally Jewish powers of the Bolshevik Moscow Center. Smashing the Soviet Union in order to force Britain to a settlement was regarded as skeptically by army planners, and in particular by the Chief of Staff Franz Halder, who noted in January 1941 that the invasion does not affect England. We must not underestimate the risks we are running in the West. For Hitler, the British ploy masked a war of naked aggression as a preemptive strike dictated by the actions of others, a reversal of reality, like the earlier war against Poland.